something going on. Your freedom is in danger. Agents of the state, they taking children from the manger. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. Take Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. They needed someone, oh, Jody wouldn't flip. They looked around, saw him quick. Oh, it made so much sense why. Oh, Brendan Dassey, he was Stephen's alibi. There's something going on in Wisconsin that's not kosher. We better stop, let's all take a look closer. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. For Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. They visit him once, they visit him twice. They make him feel so safe, sandwiches, soda so nice. No cameras rolling and under no lights. Who knows what went on up in Fox Hill Monday night. There's something going on, and freedom is in danger. Everything about this kid getting stranger and stranger. All we know, they will sacrifice your kid. Oh, Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. March 1st, alone in a room with Bert and Ernie. No parent present and no attorney. 4 hours later, with a touch of the knee, they finally get Brendan to agree. There's something going on. I said there's something going on. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. Take Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. There's something going on. I said freedom is in danger when the agents of the state can take the children from the manger. Oh, they will sacrifice your kid. Take Brendan Dassey, that's exactly what they did. Take Brendan Dassey, oh, that's exactly what they did.
Hello there, folks. Happy New Year. Well, for most of you. For those of you in the Mountain and Pacific time zones, this may be a little premature, but who knows. Anyways, so if you're watching this premiere, it's pretty much midnight Central Time. Chose this time to upload the New Year's video. So hope you guys are all out there having safe fun. Anyways, so I wanted to go ahead and do a little upload here for New Year's. You know, because New Year's is that time when you think about, you know, resolutions or things that you want to accomplish in the coming year, or you know, and that sort of stuff. And so I thought maybe I'd go ahead and talk about the subject that I want to talk about tonight. And hopefully, you know, some of you who have, you know, discovered that inner, you know, crime fighter in you, that inner, you know, criminal justice warrior, you know, those of you that have discovered that, you know, that part of yourself, essentially, right? I think maybe it's good to think about the fact that you've gotten involved, that we've gotten involved, you know, or when we get involved in things like this, such as the, you know, Avery Dassey cases, or even to go further beyond that, for me, Scott Davis, Ricky Hochstetler, and a few other cases that I actually am interested in. You know, when you become interested in these things, there's a workload that comes along with it of reading and researching, and it's a lot to take on. And so I wanted to do this video to try to help people understand that, you know, it's a kind of a marathon and not so much of a sprint. I've been seeing some people on my channel commenting on my channel where they're saying, you know, yeah, I wish them the best, but I think the system's too corrupt, I'm out, basically kind of attitude, which I don't hold it against them, but it made me want to do this video all the more to try to hopefully prevent that more of that type of attitude from occurring. And I think some of the sentiments and some of the ideas that are going to be put forth in this video will maybe hopefully help inspire people to kind of see this kind of method, this kind of idea. It has to do with the growth rings. Some of you may have heard me talking about this on my other channel the other night when I was live on my other channel. It has to do with something called the growth rings. Somebody who gave a TED talk that I just think the world of, his name is Bill Ekstrom. I will leave the link to the TED talk down in the information below, of course, and I obviously advise everybody to go check that TED talk out after this. I have taken a few small clips from it, but there's a lot more information there, and I seriously advise everybody to check out the entire talk. What's important here that he talks about is he first starts out talking about how he was back in 2008 on a Monday. He went into work. He basically says, I had it made. I had all the stock options, all the perks. I had it made. Nice corporate job and all that, right? He said, and then all of a sudden on Monday, I get called into my boss's office and I got fired. And he talks about how that was, kind of this crushing moment for him and everything. What he talks about is how that moment led to him, improving himself. It led to him causing himself to grow. It led to growth for him because he had been taken out of his comfort zone, essentially. And that's why the name of his TED Talk is, comfort will ruin your life, or how comfort can ruin your life. And that's what and it's a very, very profound, idea. It's really true when you think about most of the basic principles that you read about in almost any self improvement kind of book or anything like that. It's always about embracing the struggle, or at least acknowledging and being less being more receptive to the struggle in life. And that's essentially what the growth rings kind of get to. I like the way Bill does it, because the way he puts it, there's a lot of very interesting ideas, the way he sets up the growth rings and stuff like that. So for those of you that have, as I said, discovered your inner crime fighter, and you're wondering about how you can, how you're worried about being able to balance all the things that you're doing, all the research that you're doing. For those of you that have kids and households to run, all these things add up and they are stressful. And the important thing is, to me, is that not only is it healthy, so long as you're mindful and you maintain your personal relationships and take care of yourself, it's healthy. As long as it's very much taking yourself from a point of comfort and putting yourself into a situation where you're challenged, where you don't necessarily know all the outcomes, and that is where growth can happen. So for those of you who look into this and see that there's kind of a lot of work when you look into all this stuff, and there's a lot of reading and a lot of researching and a lot of things like that go into discovering your inner social justice warrior, your inner criminal justice warrior. Keep in mind, anything in life that's kind of worth doing, it generally will take some work. It won't just come easy, and that's why complexity is important.
What I now realize is, while that event created the greatest amount of discomfort I had ever felt, it was that discomfort, the departure from my ordered life, that forever changed it for the better. You see, friends, what makes you comfortable can ruin you. And what makes you uncomfortable is the only way to grow. Let me say that again. What makes you comfortable can ruin you, and only in a state of discomfort can you continually grow. Now, I suppose if on January 8th, somebody come up and said, gee, buddy, getting fired's a good thing, because now you're really going to grow, I probably would have smacked them. But pretty quickly, I became motivated to start a new journey. And after a couple of years of work with my new team and a PhD friend at the University of Nebraska. We had this epiphany.
Okay, so the epiphany that he had was with those, folks at the university and the the friend of his. They came up with the growth rings and the whole growth ring basically philosophy. So the way the growth rings basically lay out, folks, is you start at the bottom, you have basically stagnation. That's the first ring. It's like complete order. Rule following, minutia, all just every little, thing, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing unexpected, stagnation. Then you have one ring above that, which is just like comfort, basically. It's order, is the way they put it. It's order, but it's, the way you have to go and live your life. But you know that most of the outcomes in your life are pretty much, can be predicted for the most part. Sometimes, there's a little bit of a shakeup, but generally, for the most part, you know the predicted outcomes of most of the things you do in your life. So that's what order represents, right? And then the third ring is complexity. Okay, that's where you step out of order. You step out of your normal order that you're used to, and you step into the complexity ring. And the complexity ring is where growth is basically happening. And then you go one step beyond the complexity ring and you end up in chaos, which is too much complexity, essentially way too much complexity. It's chaos, right? So generally where you're going to be living at are in order and complexity. And this is the idea that they came up with. It's pretty brilliant. It really does kind of put these ideas into in a kind of a frame of reference that you can kind of like follow along with. So what he points out is that order is, basically, all your outcomes are pretty much predictable. Basically what's going to happen in your daily life because you're used to what happens. You're used to performing these tasks and getting the certain outcomes that you get, and that's why you're in order with those tasks. When you step out of that or beyond that, as some of you have done here, you've then stepped into complexity, and it happens in a couple of different ways. The whole moving into complexity happens in a couple different ways. But just remember, as we're going through this, that it's through complexity that the most meaningful growth is achieved. So what we're going to move into now is a segment where Bill is going to explain basically kind of a social justice issue, something that I think that a lot of you who are following, the Stephen and Brendan cases, or even the Scott Davis case, or the other, many other cases, is you have been triggered, right? You've been triggered. Something about it bothered you so much that you actually spend your spare time looking into information about it. So I think you are going to be keenly able to really appreciate the example that he gives right now of Claudette Colvin in Montgomery, back in the Jim Crow era, essentially. So this is a very interesting example. Also pay attention to how he talks about the kind of trickle-down effect, or the effect that when you get thrown into complexity, how your actions, the actions of others, trigger something to happen. They trigger a series of events, essentially, or they cause an accumulation, and that's really what happens with the supporters here in the Stephen and Brendan cases. The more people that take an interest and get involved and look into the facts of the case, and get educated and knowledgeable, and can know enough about the facts that they can't be just dissuaded by weak arguments in favor of guilt, right? So that's that part of doing all that means that you have triggered yourself, and that's something that he talks about after he explains the growth rings, is leading into the Claudette Colvin example, is the fact that there's three triggers for complexity, basically. First one is the way it happened for him. He got fired from his very comfortable job, suddenly fired, created, discomfort in his life. As he explained it, the most discomfort he'd ever felt. So that's number one, it gets triggered for you. Okay. Number two is that it can be done in a very high growth, high interactive environment where you have mentors, or like if you're in high school and you have coaches and things like that, people that are pushing you to your limits, constantly trying to get you to discover, to push your limits further and go a little bit further, and that sort of thing. That's the second way you can trigger, is by having those mentor or coach or teacher type individuals in your life that are pushing you to do that. Third one is, as you're going to see here right now,
trigger it yourself. Take a journey with me back to Montgomery, Alabama. Imagine, if you will, a young girl who's black, and she attends an all-black high school. And she takes a city bus to get there and home, which wasn't unusual in that era. And on March 2nd, 1955, she boards the bus to come home from school, and she sits near the back in the first row of seats where blacks were allowed to sit. And as the bus continues to fill with white people, there's eventually no more room in the front of the bus. And according to local law, she needed to move further back to create room for white people to sit. You see, Montgomery had an order in place that, when followed, led to a very predictable outcome: repression of people with little conflict. But 15-year-old Claudette Colvin had just spent the last month in high school studying black history, and she was understandably fed up with the historic and existing atrocities. And so on this day, she decided she didn't like Montgomery's order. And by refusing to give up her seat, she sent a community, our laws, and our entire country into complexity. Yes, 9 months before Rosa Parks made her famous decision to stay put, it was a 15-year-old girl that was handcuffed, dragged from the bus, and taken to prison. It was Miss Colvin, not Rosa Parks, who first fought the law, and by the way, was also the star plaintiff to testify in the famous lawsuit that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So, I use Claudette's actions not to heighten awareness of race issues, although that's not necessarily bad, but I use it as an example of every issue, of every situation in an ordered environment. It's a real and perfect example of complexity forcing people, our communities, and our courts into discomfort, and the downstream impact that can occur anytime someone elects to move from order.
Kind of like when two filmmakers left their normal, predictable life that they lived in New York and headed for Wisconsin and spent 10 years making a documentary. That's the kind of event he's talking about. They put themselves into complexity. They decided to, they saw this news thing about Stephen Avery, thought it was interesting that he had previously been wrongfully convicted, and they decided to put themselves into complexity, and the rest is history. And now how many of us have now been set into complexity because of their decision to set themselves into complexity, right? How many more of us have done so, right? So it's this kind of ripple effect, or this, snowball effect, right? Whereas as this snowball continues to roll downhill, it continues to pick up more and more weight, more and more momentum, more and more mass. So that's exactly the type of thing that Bill is talking about when he's talking about how, together, we make a difference, and how when everybody gets set into complexity, kind of in the way that, or a great many people get set into complexity, the way that Making a Murderer has done, even The Staircase, that new one, The Innocent Man, very interesting new documentary on Netflix. These things inform us, and they set us into complexity because they tell us that we have issues in the criminal justice system that desperately do need to be dealt with. And that's what these things teach us. And so the idea of complexity is really important in two ways. I just want to hammer this home. in the sense that it's important in an individual basis with us individually. Like for me, I know I was highly into the complexity my first 2 years after watching the first Making a Murderer and all my research. So, but after about 2 years, that complexity wasn't so complex anymore. It started to come back into the realm of comfort again. And I think a lot of people out there will discover that. But it's also got a second meaning where it means complexity on the bigger scale. On the bigger scale, really. So that means, that means where everybody's getting involved. Something has raised the alarm to where suddenly people are rising up, paying attention, and developing opinions. So that's the two different ways. It can be an individual way of triggering into complexity, or it can be a more societal or a more communal triggering into complexity and change. So it's important to know those two different concepts, but they are greatly tied together as I'm talking about here, because look at what the two filmmakers, Laura Ricciardi and Moira Demos, by making their decision to put themselves into complexity, look at the complexity, look at what they triggered. They triggered how many of us to put ourselves into complexity. So like I said, there's a definite trickle down kind of, effect. So just wanted to point that concept out, because it is important. The two different, ways that this applies, individually and more globally or communally or societally. So we have to figure out how that looks. What does that look like? How do we do that? How do we make that happen? How does society, because it obviously can't just be 5 people making the decision for everybody else. How is it that everybody gets informed enough to be able to make this, to make this really become a conscious, a thing that most people are even more people than that are unconscious of it now. How do we continue to build on that? And that's really the big, for me, that's the big push. That's what I'm constantly trying to do, is to create the awareness, to give people as many of the facts as possible without, so that they don't have to go digging into the documents, but so that they can still see some of the issues with the cases. That's always been my goal. And like I said, due to the two filmmakers setting themselves onto a path of complexity back in 2005, basically, me and many other people in the Wrecking Crew, we've all now set ourselves on a path of complexity. And hopefully this will continue to snowball as it rolls downhill. So, many thanks going out to the Wrecking Crew, Cozy's Wrecking Crew. You guys are great. Thank you so much for all of your support. And for everybody who's subscribed to this channel, thank you for your support. It's been a really, really great year. I am happy to continue to bring whatever I can to the masses. There's been so many people, even before I got to my current level of subscribers. I always had people making very touching comments. It's just been a really good year. A lot of positive, really, for me. A lot of positive this year. And I'm looking forward to a very good year to come. And I hope you guys wish you guys all a very happy new year as well. Let's go get them. And, remember the words of Bill Ekstrom.
Courts. But it's order you should fear the most, because it is a threat. And order disrupting people like Jesus, Galileo, Claudette Colvin, Aspen's trainer, and maybe even a few of you have already proven. Now think about this. It's not the complexity triggering individuals or events you should fear the most, but it's your own willingness to accept or seek discomfort that will dictate the growth of not just you, but our entire world. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this.
Oh, my what they have put you through, not that we could ever fathom or try to imagine the depth of your pain. But the case was a sham, the trial was a scam. The DA, he's a legal stain. I said, Mama and Papa Avery, we stand with you, no matter what the state says. Oh, their lies we see through, because the blood, it was a planet, the car was a planet, Sam William Henry 582. The bones, they were planted, the bullet, yeah, planted, the key in the bedroom too. I said, Mama and Papa Avery, we send our love to you, just letting you know we can see what they did and continue to do. Said this one's for you, just letting